All right, guys, welcome back to Choose Views. I'm Richard Chu if you're just tuning in. And I see that big smile from our next guest who's making sure that our leadership has the support that they need and that we are doing everything we can to win state majorities and hold them. Heather Williams serves as president of the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee. You know, I love me some acronyms, Heather, but every now and then, yours is one you got to say slowly, because if not, you will run over yourself trying to say it the right way. Tell me you haven't had that happen to you before, even telling folks where you're from.
It is so long and so many syllables, and it is early. So good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, it's good to see you again. Good to hear your voice. You may have heard the previous segment. We had David Jolly on, who's running for governor, of course, in the great state of Florida. Former Republican, sort of an independent centrist, and then said it's time for me to join the team and do it the right way. That to me is when I've talked about, you know, people going the full mile when it comes to Republicans that have become Democrats or left the Republican Party. The full mile for me is signing up for the new team, and he's done that. Talk a little bit about, you know, what you see there, but also kind of meld that into your responsibility with the DLCC.
Yeah, I love this idea, right, of like the new team. And, I think kind of bridging and using maybe Florida as an example, we are seeing in these red states voters who maybe haven't turned out for the Democratic Party or have felt left behind or have felt, unattended to show up for elections. Our work at the DLCC is to track and monitor all these state legislative elections across the country and figure out the path to building power in these state houses. And already this cycle, we've flipped 30 seats, including a couple of seats in Florida. And the one state house seat in Trump's backyard.
Yeah.
So I think this idea of bringing people into the party, giving them a place to be and having them, see themselves in it is really important this year.
So we're in this last stretch. I mean, I've been doing a countdown and saying, you know, when we were at 120 days and we were at 100 days and we were at 90 days. And, now we're in we're just over 80 days. So what's the outlook? I mean, you obviously can't predict the future, but you certainly can use current events and things that are happening as a way of measuring where we're headed. What do you see and what are you hopeful for?
Yeah, it's such a great question. So, there are a number of really good signs. There's also a lot of reminders that we have a lot of hard work to do in these last 83 days to make the case to voters, right? So just some of the good things, right? I talked about the 30 seats that we've already flipped this cycle. It's such a great barometer and check in on the electorate and how we're doing. Candidate recruitment has been unbelievable across the country. We've got places where they've got full recruitment in like North Carolina, incredible recruitment in Texas, places where the first step is to get someone to raise their hand to run for office. So that's a great sign. Our candidates are out there talking to voters. That is what they do best. That is the thing that only they can do. And they're having very real conversations with them, right? They're talking about the challenges and the opportunities and what hope looks like and what their community could look like. And we need all of those candidates across the country talking to voters every single day and making their case, right? And that's the work. We know that we are on the precipice of a barrage of communication and resources being spent in these battleground states and frankly across the country, right? So a lot of work to do. We still got some wind at our back, but there is no doubt that we cannot take anything for granted and we need everyone to participate.
Yeah, and it's so true. You talk about candidate recruitment. I want to share something with you that I talked about earlier in the week, Heather. I'm fully locked into whoever wins the primary, that's our person. Leave your ego and your frustration and I didn't get my candidate fed to me the right way. Leave that garbage at home because we've got to win. On a state level, we got to win. On a federal level. So leave that stuff alone. Let's get behind who the candidate is in the primary, if that's how it's been meted out, and then let's go forward. And I said that one of the things that Tallarico, one of the things that Crockett did and has continued to do, and one of the things that Dr. Syed is doing, which is clearly evident, and others are as well, is that when they are challenged with something, they are responding with the message that the voters want to hear and how they want them to respond, and with the energy that they want them to respond with. Where do you think that is coming from?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. I think there's twofold, right? I think in the case of someone like Tallarico, he is a state legislator. His job has been to have meaningful, honest conversations with constituents at a very local level. And one of the joys of this ballot level is you really learn how to do that, right? You really learn how to have those conversations, how to tell the story of what you've accomplished, what you're trying to do. And I think that it's such an important stepping stone and skill building process. So I think he is aided, right, by that experience. That's incredible. I also think that you've got folks who are able to use the tools that we have available to us, right? The microphones we have, social media, organizing tools, et cetera, to be the authentic voice that they are. They're not using other people as spokespeople. They're not using, right, like talking points that are perfectly curated. They're just having honest conversations, and they're able to build support. And I think tell a story in a really authentic way because it's their first person view of things, right? And I think that's really, really important. And I wholeheartedly agree that, the Democratic Party, frankly, the parties in this country are nothing but made up of people. And it is the people's choice who they decide want to represent them. And it is our job to work to support that story and get it out there and make sure that voters understand the choices that they have. And, I think it is an exciting time. And I think it's going to increasingly get exciting as we move through this election and into the presidential.
What's been one of your surprises, not one, but a few of the surprises where you've been working your tail off to get a state legislator elected or through the next step of the election process, and you were surprised? Like, we were hopeful and it was narrow and maybe we were behind a little bit, and then boom, that person, he or she, ended up prevailing. Have there been some of those that have really just continued to keep that wind in your sails?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of those stories. I think, being reminded of what can be accomplished when they get into office is also incredible, right? New Mexico has such incredible stories about how they are using state government to support people in their communities, access to childcare, great schools, so many good things. But I think the other thing that's been really exciting this year, for me anyways, is the progress is being made in red states.
Hmm.
This is important both for the long term as we think about what happens in the post census redistricting process, right? When we identify where the new districts will be on the other side of the census, and new maps are drawn for the next decade. And we understand that there is, deep population shifts, particularly into the South. Our ability to recruit great candidates at the local level, to have those candidates become competitive and in some and definitely in some cases win, has been such a cool story. I think this year and this cycle has really bared that out. We talked a little bit about Florida, but we've already broken the supermajority, Republican supermajority, so the ultimate power for Republicans in Mississippi,
Yep.
and put Democrats back into that negotiating room. And those stories are really important because they are progress points and one step closer to hope for voters who, again, I think have felt either left behind or unattended to, or have not found their place, and it's really exciting.
Dr. Dupree down in Mississippi has been a guest on the show, and he's one of those folks in Mississippi that helped break that fever that they've had for such a long time in a state that has such a large African American population. To not have the representation on a state level, certainly on a federal level, that's needed. It's just unacceptable. So thank you for the work that you guys and your team have put in to make those kinds of things happen. It means a lot. And a lot of times people don't understand. I mean, I think the nation got a lesson last summer with the redistricting attempt in Texas. A lot of people didn't realize, and it's just unfortunate, conversation for another day about our educational system, that the state legislatures are at the table when it comes to redistricting. And that, that's so important that we have as many trifectas as we can, or as a balance of the two chambers on a state legislative level. Just share a little bit before we go to our break about why that's so important, that people understand that state offices make such a difference when it comes to this conversation around redistricting.
Yeah, I mean, in the vast majority of places, state legislators play a role either in directly drawing the maps or participating in the process. And that is particularly true in the South, right? Where the Supreme Court's decision on the Voting Rights Act and the removal of protections for voters that ensure that they're getting a say in their elected official, right, is so critically important. So I think, whether we're talking about trifectas, right, that's the ultimate, but just putting more Democrats in a position of power is meaningful. In Georgia, just in June, they were going to go back and redraw maps for the 2028 election. And they were going to do it now because they continue to lose power in their state house every election. And they wanted to secure it right before it got too bad for them. But the truth is that with a Democratic coalition and a few Republicans, they were able to block that. And so, the trifecta is the ultimate prize, of course, because it gives you ultimate power. But I would be remiss to say that, every Democrat that we're electing into these places is a meaningful progress point and gives us one more voice. And when we think about that Mississippi example, putting Democrats into that negotiating room by breaking those Republican supermajorities is really meaningful. We're not going to be able to stop everything in that regard, right? But if we don't recognize these moments and we don't work towards them, like, we're always going to be on the outside, and that's just not acceptable. So I think we've got a lot of work to do, but it's a really important and exciting time, because at this point, every election has redistricting implications.
And it gives the voters more hope. It gives the voters that additional reason that, yeah, my vote did matter, because this group of Democrats were able to, they didn't stop something. They sure as heck slowed it down to give us a chance to breathe so we can get more people into the room. So I love the way that you put that. Heather, let's take a little bit of a break so that you and I both can breathe and get our voices back. The number is 773-763-9278. I'm Richard Chu. Keep it locked in. We'll be right back with more of Chu's Views. All right, guys, welcome back to Chu's Views. If you're just tuning in, I am hanging out with Heather Williams, who is the head of that group that's got a lot of syllables and a long acronym. It's the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee. Heather, so there are some races that you are targeting, you and the organization is targeting, with energy, with effort, with conversation, and with money. So let's talk about the races. And I know there's a bunch of them, but you're looking at your whiteboard in the conference room and you're saying these are the ones that, right now we got to be laser focused on. What are those races?
There are 19 state legislative races in just a handful of states that would create 6 new Democratic majorities and 4 new trifectas. We're talking about, a scale at a ballot level that is very large, but a handful of seats that are really meaningful, right? And if folks are interested in, learning more about the targeted races in states that are really important, we've got a whole list of them on our website at DLCC.org. We're constantly refining and updating that. We want to make sure that folks understand, what's happening in their backyard, and that this ballot level and the power implications of this election are really made clear, and people know who's running for office. The awesome thing about this ballot level is that these are everyday people raising their hand to do something extraordinary, right? And it is really exciting to see that happen, and to get involved, and to know that you can have an opportunity to really communicate with this candidate or this elected official, and really have a important conversation. So lots of really exciting things. It's like picking your favorite kid, right? Like how do you pick your favorites? Because I'm really excited about the opportunities. And I know that they're really great.
What are the candidates who are in those races saying to you are things that they need, or well, let's start with that, and then I have a supplemental question to that.
Yeah, one of the greatest things about this election and one of the greatest challenges, right, is that these races are nested within other important races. So if you think about, there's a really important Senate race in Michigan. There's an important governor's race. There's a bunch of important congressional races, and our state legislative seats, our state Senate seats, and our state House seats are all nested right underneath that. And so we're constantly competing for people's time and attention and resources. I just mentioned like these candidates are often first time candidates. They're raising their hand to run for office, doing the really difficult thing. They are everyday people, right? They are, leaders in their communities. They are not billionaires. And they are fighting for attention at a ballot level that is, resourced differently,
Hmm.
and that looks a little bit different. And so that is one of the greatest opportunities is challenges is just building that name ID and making sure that these candidates are again on the doors, sort of in the community talking directly, but also that we've got a mechanism to scale their story and their communication so that folks know what their choices are when they get their ballots.
The supplemental question that I wanted to ask has to do with the voters, and what are you hearing from candidates that are the big two or three items that the candidates, I'm sorry, that the voters want candidates to really lean into, whether and whether that be on a state by state basis or regional. What are you hearing is the thing or the few things?
Yeah, if I kind of put an umbrella on it, right, or over it, I should say, it is the kitchen table issues, right? It is how do I afford life, right? How do I be the best version of myself in today's America, right? Healthcare prices, healthcare access, energy prices, energy access. Good quality schools, right, that are going to help our kids succeed in their future. And then we get right like very, very local issues. Communities that are talking about the what it might mean to bring a data center into town, or what it may mean to create new jobs, what it may mean to support schools that are maybe on the verge of consolidating. How do we give people good access to parks and
Hmm.
all the things that are really rich in our communities? So I think what we know this year and what we've seen this entire election cycle is that voters want their elected officials to be dealing with the issues that are their responsibility, right? They
Yeah.
don't want them in these culture wars. They don't want them making up fake issues. Like they literally want results and progress on the things that matter, and that the things that will help improve their lives, the lives of their community members, and the job that is government. And that's, I think, really important. And I feel like our candidates have done such a great job of sticking to that, and really being focused and meeting voters where they are on that, and having incredible discussions about how do you solve for those problems, what is possible. So it's good. I feel really clear about where we're at with that.
One of the things that I had on my mind earlier when we're talking about, I mentioned Talwico, I mentioned Dr. Syed, is that their ability to quickly respond to criticisms or commentary and all the rest. And I said that one of the things that I believe that both of them have, which so many of it seems as though Democrats who are running good campaigns on a national level or on a state level, is that they're listening. They're really listening. You know, sometimes we all can get caught up in listening with what's going to be the next thing we're going to say, and that's just human nature. But seems like some of the candidates on our side are truly listening to, like, what did that person just say to me, and how is that person really being impacted by that which is around them in their environment. Tell me what your thoughts are there.
I think you're right, right? Like we are in a place where we are delivered so much individualized information, right? We
Yeah.
get our own access to all kinds of things that come to us directly on our phones, right? It's very personalized, it's very individualized, and In the best moments, you feel, sort of accommodated, you feel heard, right? Like in the worst moments, you feel followed, right? But I think, I think in that, it has created, right, a real desire, right, to be heard. And I think in some moments, right, that can feel like we are very individualistic, right? And what we're looking for is someone to solve like my problems.
Hmm.
And I think that that is true in some cases, but I think the bigger picture is like we see ourselves as representative of the communities that we live in. And if I can fight for the thing that I see, like it's going to help us all, right?
Right.
And at the core of it, like people still care deeply about their communities. When it gets personal, right? When it gets local, people are there to defend and have those conversations. And it is the sweet spot of this ballot level. But I also just think like, some of the discussions about how do we meet people where they are, how do we meet voters and constituents where they are, how do we tell the story of the successes and the progress that we've made and make it tangible for them.
Hmm.
Um, our communication mechanisms have changed so much, right? And what we expect from them have changed so much. And it is absolutely necessary that we meet people where they are. And I think you've given two great examples, right, of people who are really able to do that. They are in charge of their campaigns and their messaging, and it is authentic to them. They are delivering it firsthand. No one is giving them the right words to say, and I think that that is also a really important sort of piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, because we heard so much in recent years, recent election cycles on a national level and local level, all the rest, that it felt as though Democrats were too scripted, that they weren't coming from the heart, and they weren't bringing the real response based on how they really feel about an issue, and I think that that those two and others as well certainly have been able to capture that and speak honestly, speak transparently, and all the rest. As we wrap up, Heather, and always great to talk with you, and I know we're going to do this again sooner than later. Tell our audience what I like to do is how can folks get involved and be a part of the success that you've built and be able to help us win more elections, state legislative elections, as well as the federal work that we're putting in.
Yeah, getting involved in a state legislative campaign, like you are in it. You are not one of thousands of volunteers that never get access to the candidate and never get to really be a part of it. Like you are in it. And I mentioned that we've got DLCC.org has a list of hundreds of candidates across the country that are meaningful for power in the state, that are meaningful for progress, that helps to break down, right, this sort of big unruly ballot level and give some real points, right, of attention. Um, you know, this ballot level not only does incredible things inside of the state, it also has a deep impact, as we were talking about, on redistricting, on the path to the presidency, on the power and impact of our governors. So, whether you care deeply about the federal level or the state level, this is such an important ballot level to get involved. And, resources are short, right? And by resources, I also just mean time and attention. And any little thing that you can do is incredibly important and impactful, and it will go such a long way. So, head to dlcc.org. You'll find a candidate I'm confident that will excite you because there are so many of them, and we appreciate it all.
Absolutely. Heather, I know you will, but we look forward to having you back on this show again and keeping your message going forward and just being able to ring loudly all the things that we can do as Democrats to have continued success throughout the country. So thanks for being with us this morning. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I always love our conversations. It's so great. I can't wait, I should say, to do this again. And I hope to see you soon.
We'll make it happen, Heather. Be well. Have a great weekend. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Bye bye now.